We discuss Palpatine's ultimate ambitions, plans which would see him ascend to the status of God Emperor and even beyond. That and more in today's video. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. So in a few recent videos, I've talked about Palpatine's ultimate goal, what he wanted to do after defeating the Rebel Alliance and winning the Galactic Civil War. I figured since we just covered the Alliance's grand plan, now would be a good time to take a look at Papa Palpatine and what he saw in his dark future. We've talked about this on the channel before, but I thought it'd be a good opportunity to go into it with a bit more depth. Keep in mind, everything today comes from Star Wars Legends, but at the end, maybe I'll give my thoughts on canon as well. Editor's note, I didn't have time to do that. Maybe another day. So for those who don't know, although Palpatine, of course, is killed at the Battle of Endor in Star Wars Legends, he returns in clone bodies during the Dark Empire comic series. Dark Empire is weird. In the 1990s, it was presented as one of two alternatives for the post-Endor expanded universe, which after the release of the original trilogies and the prequel still being some time off was seen as a potential moneymaker. Dark Empire was a comic series. It started to release around the same time as Heir to the Empire and the rest of the Thrawn trilogy, the latter of which proved to be far more commercially successful and popular among fans. Dark Empire thus twisted itself to fit within the lore established by the Thrawn trilogy, and it would remain canon, though various authors, depending on the story being told, would sometimes ignore it. I mean, Dark Empire was a story of massive scale. It saw the Empire essentially reconquer the galaxy, taking Coruscant. It is kind of an abrupt aside in what ended up being a pretty fleshed out era. Still, I do like the lore around Palpatine, I like the new ship designs, and I do think it can be incorporated into a pretty coherent view of Star Wars Legends. One of my favorite aspects of Dark Empire, however, is the additional information we got about Palpatine and his future plans. Much of this comes from the Dark Empire sourcebook. You can find it online. I think it's worth checking out. And that will be the source for most of today's content. In the Dark Empire comics, which consist of Dark Empire 1, Dark Empire 2, and Empire's End, Palpatine returns. We know he has ambitions of conquest and reestablishing control, defeating the Jedi in the New Republic, but we don't get a whole lot more than that. The Dark Empire sourcebook really goes into his ambitions and what he's been doing behind the scenes. Now, you gotta keep in mind that some of the lore is a bit wonky, especially about how Palpatine initially came to power. This released before the Clone Wars, and Palpatine was originally speculated to have seized control of the Old Republic in a more political manner. Not only did he become, usually they called him a president, but he more slowly subverted and corrupted the Republic until it became the Empire. And this was largely due to George Lucas's personal politics regarding U.S. presidents and U.S. democracy at the time he was writing the original outlines for the series. But one addition I like is the idea that Palpatine initially surrounded himself by the military power he built up within the Old Republic and later the Empire, but as he gained more and more control, he sought to sheath himself in the dark side, with advisors, adepts, and others hidden within the top level of the Empire. Here's a quote I like. Palpatine knew precisely why the Empire couldn't last without his dread power. He had designed it that way. No one ever suspected how much he relied on the dark side of the Force. He shaped those of his government by using the Force against them. He used it to control his fleets and to drive his soldiers on to victory. He used it to destroy his enemies from a distance and learn of conspiracies against him. Without it, there was no way the Empire could endure as he had designed it. The dark side flowed through him like some primordial ichor and was the key to all his power. It was the key to his destiny, for the dark side, coupled with his mastery of cloning, was the key to immortality. So after Palpatine's death, he transfers his essence to a clone hidden within his secret citadel on the planet Biss within the deep core, and he allows the Empire to tear itself apart. He intended to cleanse the Empire of weakness, and in his grand return, he did two things. For one, he planned a blitz against the New Republic, known as Operation Shadow Hand, but he also began to embed dark side Force users his adepts, his executors, more obviously and prominently within the ranks of the Imperial military. Palpatine was very studious. After securing power as the Emperor, and even during his time recovering on Biss, he was preparing for the next stage of his plan, which required even greater mastery of the Force and a new apprentice, which brings us to the beginning of Dark Empire 1. Palpatine's grand plan is to turn Luke to the dark side and take him as his apprentice. Eventually, he wanted to do the same to Leia and her and Han's children. I'll read again from the source book. With the knowledge gained from his dark side compendium, Palpatine would create an eternal dynasty, with the descendants of Skywalker as its nobility and Palpatine himself as its omnipotent ruler. The full scale of his plan is thus revealed. Palpatine's desire for an eternal rule of darkness. Even Ulic Qel-Droma would be envious of Palpatine. He had succeeded where all others had failed in taming the dark side. He would journey across the universe, spreading the shadow of his rule, blotting out the stars themselves, and taking his dark rule to other helpless galaxies. As an aside, kind of funny, you may have noticed at this point I haven't mentioned the Sith at all. That's because Star Wars still didn't know what the Sith were. They knew Darth Vader was a Lord of the Sith, but what that means was up for debate. Palpatine himself was not a Sith Lord until later on. Anyway, Palpatine's new weapons used in Dark Empire are illustrative of his grander ambitions. The World Devastator is perhaps his most impressive superweapon. It was capable of consuming entire planets, upgrading itself, and also creating ships, droids, starfighters, anything at will. World Devastators had no upper limit in terms of power. Theoretically, World Devastators, given enough time, could become the size of planets, if not larger. This nearly unlimited potential for production would have powered Palpatine's extragalactic ambitions. The Eclipse, people don't realize how powerful it was intended to be. Everyone thinks the Eclipse, oh, it's about a super star destroyer in size with a kind of quasi-super laser. No, when you read the source book, the Eclipse was meant to be over twice as long as the Executor. The Executor and the super star destroyer itself got scaled up from 8 kilometers to 19. If the Eclipse had been scaled up accordingly, it would have been over 40 kilometers long, which is insane. The Eclipse was meant to be Palpatine's personal flagship, but he also intended to produce an endless fleet of Sovereign-class superstar destroyers. They were only slightly smaller and less powerful than the Eclipse, and probably would have been the first thing Palpatine had World Devastators pumping out after subduing the Alliance. What would Palpatine's Dark Empire have been like? Well, dark side Force users would have continued to see prominence within the Dark Empire, but Palpatine himself would have also became more and more powerful as he continued to study, collect relics, and the big thing would have been finding a solution for the degradation of his clone bodies. Biss itself, the Emperor's secret citadel in the deep core, held a prototype society showing what the rest of the galaxy and perhaps the universe would have been like under Palpatine's ultimate control. As he experimented with the dark side, he discovered a way to push his influence so far that he drained others, even powerful Force sensitives, of their life force, keeping them in limbo as they sustain him, filled with an illusion of tranquility as they sustain their emperor. So, under the Dark Empire, that eventually would have been the universe. Countless beings giving their energy to Palpatine as he perhaps ascends to some other place. But that's all for today. Let me know your thoughts on this video and more down below.